My name is Aksh. I'm so happy that you guys are all here. A lot of my private conversations with partners, this question kept coming up like, hey, are you seeing election impact on your business or other partners feeling it? So I was like, maybe it's a good topic to cover in a webinar. So agenda for today is there's a quick poll that Leanne has been saying on the bottom right corner of your chat. If you haven't yet answered, please do. I'll share some data internally, and then we'll talk about what happens usually post-election. I use the word usually because I have to say past data is not a predictor of future. We'll talk about the impact of policies of both the candidates and how to prepare our businesses, including ours at occasion, for eventuality that either of the candidate wins. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So the question is, how are you feeling about sales this year versus last year? Leanne, do you have the response answers?
Yep. We have 4 responses, and 1 said really slow, 2 said somewhat slow, and 1 said not slow at all. So I'd say
Okay,
go on the slow side.
75%. 75% on the slow side. Great. This is what the data is telling us. I took the data for 2024 over 2023 for January through October. Overall, seats booked at the same store is down 5%. Of course, you can see the variability is significant depending on which month we're talking about. Summer was very slow. I mean, you can start to see like overall the seats are at least 5 to 7% down year over year. But sales are like marginally higher, like less than 1%. And I'm using this data platform wide, so like all across the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. When the seats are down, sales are up. Where is that difference being made up from? It's prices, basically. Average seat prices are still or have gone up by 6%, or what we call inflation. I just use the fancy word average price per seat to reflect the inflation data. So it's up 6%. But again, compared to 2023, this number was closer to 9%. So it has come down in 2024. I took the pre-election anxiety data. I mean, we all agree that we're in the consumer discretionary spending category. This is not like food, clothing, shelter. They're the first to take a hit when people feel anxious. This is the data coming from Michigan, University of Michigan's consumer sentiment, which is a very good gauge of how consumers spend money. Wall Street uses this, all the big banks and stock markets use it. This is 4 election cycles, 2012, 2016, 2020, and 2024. We can see 2020, of course, because of COVID, there was a dramatic collapse in the beginning of the year. But every year, whether you take 2016, it went down from just above 90 to below 90. Take 2012, again, like it started going down in summer. Summer is where the sentiment bottoms out. And just like clockwork in 2024, which is this big purple line, the election sentiment started going down in spring, bottomed out in the summer months, and is now starting to come back up, just following everything that's been going around in the previous election cycles. This is not to say, again, past data is going to be a predictor of what's going to happen, but we can take that as a significant trend line to see what happens after the elections are over. And by the way, elections are somewhere here in November. This data is just through October. So if I change this, elections happen sometime at the beginning of November, the data curves start to continue to go up. So that gives us hope. That gives me hope. That gives me confidence to say, okay, if this election cycle is no different than previous election cycles, we should see the consumer sentiment continue to recover, spending continue to recover. I personally am preparing for consumers to start spending again once we get past the inauguration. It may be up and down between November and January, but I think post-January, we should expect a nice healthy bump going into the next year. To me, it all comes down to inflation. If I'm planning my business, it's all about inflation. Consumers are more aware of inflation because it's in the news. Candidates are talking about it. It directly impacts our purses when we spend money. Inflation directly also is connected to interest rates. We'll talk about interest rates a little bit, which is the cost of borrowing, credit card debt, household debt. whatever that is. Inflation and interest rate go hand in hand. I'm using this data directly from Wall Street Journal, which is what are the impacts of policies of Harris and Trump on inflation. I'm ignoring everything else. There is no politics involved. It's literally what are their policies and how do they impact inflation. So Harris, because she's proposing a big spending on the government side, Wall Street doesn't expect a big spike in inflation, but it expects inflation to be higher for a lot longer than to come down as it's been doing. What does that mean? Instead of 2%, it may be 3%, 4%. But the Federal Reserve, which controls interest rates, if they see that, they're not going to reduce the interest rate, which means consumer spending will be hurt. On the other hand, with Trump, because of the trade barrier stuff, the deportation of illegal immigrants, even if it is 1 million people, that's 1 million people lost from the workforce, which will bump up wages. It is just expected. So there are more direct impacts to inflation from Trump's policies. And as the likelihood of his win has gone up, we can see what's happened in the bond markets, the cost of borrowing, and a pretty good indicator of what's going to happen to interest rates a few months down the road. So even though the Federal Reserve cut interest rates right here, which is what the stock market was expecting, so that's why the interest rates have been going down. The moment in early September when Trump's presidency chance of winning went up, interest rates have gone up significantly. Even though it looks like this is 0.5, this is like thousands of dollars extra per year for cost of borrowing. Inflation is probably one of my biggest strategic priorities. And so in this segment, we'll quickly talk about like how to deal with inflation internally in our businesses, which I think is a strategic priority. So I have two examples here. I use golf because I'm learning how to play golf over and over again. So pardon the references. So if you had these two options as consumers, right? Like you could buy a class for $100 a person or $105 a person. Which one are you likely to choose? You're likely to choose the $100 per person. What I haven't said is how much you're going to pay, which is different. Here, I made the decision on $100 a person, but the final price on golf on the first option is actually higher than the second option. And the reason is there's a 15% fee that was tagged on to the purchase after I made the decision. And this is very hard to comprehend, but these are two separate decisions that happen with the consumers all the time. How much does it cost me and how much does it pay? And government does this very well because you could be buying a t-shirt for $40, but the final price is $47, $49 because there's a tax involved that comes afterwards. To me, I think the more we try to separate these decisions, there's a strategic clarity that comes up, which is how do we deal with inflation in our businesses? And I believe this is the strategy that I would be using if I were in your shoes, is not to increase the price per seat going into next year as much as you can. You could increase the price of physical add-ons. Customers are expecting those prices to go up, but the easiest strategy is number 3, which is to start charging customers fees, which shows up finally after they've made the decision to say, okay, I want to buy these classes. Then they get hit with 5%, 10%, 15% fee. We have businesses in Chicago who are charging up to 15% that use Occasion. I just went on a mid-Atlantic visit to our partners, and some of them have now moved over to charging customers 5%, 6%. Start with small amounts, and then you can increase it to a higher fee if you want to manage the risk. We don't see any conversion changes, to be honest. So there is no impact to conversion. You might get 1 out of 5,000, 1 out of 10,000 customers who will be like, hey, I'm not going to pay the fee. But that's just the nature of business. Our business, experiential segments, falls into entertainment and education. And if you look at any other spending in that category, it's all fee-based. Sometimes it's up to 30%. Ticketmaster is notorious. Airbnb, travel, everything is fee-based. This is a business model that customers expect. This is one strategy that I think is going to be successful going into next year to deal with inflation and higher cost for our businesses. That's what I wanted to cover. It's quick, it's easy. I'm happy to open it up to Q&A for the remaining time.
Jean Cox has a question.
That kind of makes me think like we have a problem where, oh my gosh, somebody just booked 10 seats for a class that we're selling for like $50, and told Jim, I said, this will be the person that cancels 3 days before. And how we have it set up right now is I'm trying to make customers happy. We're giving a rebooking code, so they're not getting gift cards because I'm not doing that anymore. So at least we have that. But if we say charged a higher booking fee, which I guess my husband said that the business would get the extra money from the additional booking fee, then we could possibly say that when you cancel, you only get the original back and not
Yes.
the booking fee back. So
Yes.
at least the customer is faced with, well, if I cancel for 10 people, it's $5 a head.
Yes.
The
Very good question. Yeah, so I will address that. So I think it's in the context of occasion that you're asking this question, how to implement this. So currently, if you're passing on occasions booking fee to your customers and you want to add service fees, which is what I think I call your fees on top of it, I do not recommend adding two fees to the customer. You do not want to add booking fees, taxes, seller fees. You want to combine seller fees with booking fees together. What does that look like? So let's say if my occasion is charging 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever that is, you want to increase that to like 7 or 8% and call it seller fees. So what occasion does is we collect that fee from you. So you absorb the fee, but you charge 8% to the customer as one line item. That says seller fees. Now, in terms of like adjusting the rate based on the price of classes, you can do that. In occasion, you can say my camps at $300, $400. I only want to charge 5% fee versus like small ticket items, which are $30, $40. You can charge 10% fee. So it can be different for each type of class. I'll show you an example. Give me 1 second.
Anybody else have a question?
Well, yeah, so I was looking at the individual listing. I'm assuming that this lives under additional pricing where you tack on a fixed fee to each booking.
Yes.
But like, how does that appear? So
Yeah, let
I,
me show you.
yeah, how does that appear to the customer if we're
Great
trying to
question.
not have them have multiple fees?
Yeah,
And
great question.
I think it's also important to point out because somebody helped me a couple weeks ago with refunds. That when I'm refunding someone to not refund that booking fee. Like if I charged them 36, they paid $37.62, and then to only refund them
The
36.
C. Yeah.
Yes. So
Totally. Thank you for bringing that up again, Erica. So here's a good example. I just wanted to show you and Jean how does it visually look to the customer. Of course, like this is on the desktop. 90+% of occasion bookings come from a mobile device. So keep that in the context. So I'll show you both how it looks on either devices. So here on the first page, as the customer is building their reservation, they see $295 per person. And as I add them, my order total on the right changes. I'm making a decision based on this. This is what I see. Okay, I'm going to pay this. Now, when I expand this, I can see that there is a non-refundable fee of 15% that this business is charging. So if I were to cancel, the business is only returning me $590, not the $88. And of course, they also have a very different refund policy. So like, because you're selling time sensitive stuff, you do not want to refund customers 2 days before if they cancel. You want to have it extremely strict as possible. It depends on your values and your customer service. So I'll leave that up to individual businesses. But that's what it visually looks like. Now, let me make the screen smaller so we can see what it looks like on a mobile device. Give me 1 second. So the moment I start to make this smaller, when the customer loads the page, the only thing that they see is at the top, the order summary. So if I close this, and as I'm scrolling, again, this is what the customer experience looks like. I am just adding this and I'm seeing 885 as my total. Not until when I go to the next step, or if I click and expand this, am I seeing that it's actually much higher. Now, it's not deceptive. It's just standard business practice that every company deploys this. I would not add two levels of fees here. So I would not say seller fees, credit card fees, booking fees, taxes. Like I would just combine. I would have two line items: taxes if you're required to collect taxes, and seller fees as a percent of the order total.
Sarah wants to know, does the non-refundable note on the taxes and fees automatically populate?
No, that's a customizable copy that you can add when we can, one of us can find you the article and put it in the chat. I think you might need us to enable the feature for your account, but it should be most likely enabled for everybody. In the help articles, it's called service fees and how to enable them. Since the questions are coming up, I will share where this lives in terms of setup and stuff. So I think that would be a good use of our time right now. So give me 1 second. Once you log into your Occasion workspace, if you go to settings, account settings, advanced account settings, there is a setting called fee markup that you can enable in your account. Once you've enabled that and you go into the listing editor and go to additional pricing, you should see these two sections pop up that say fee description and fee percentage. So here's where you can say, I want to collect 10% fee, and you can then say non-refundable service fees, whatever your copy needs to be. So currently, this is listing by listing that you can adjust this.
Okay, so just to be clear, once I activate the thing, and then on the customer side, it will combine the taxes and fees, that additional fee that I've charged plus taxes, plus the fee that Occasion charges is all going to be in that one little, it just combines it. And then I can define what that little question mark
Correct.
says. Okay.
Exactly.
Any other questions?
I appreciate everybody's time. I'll conclude the webinar and
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.